You know, I want to tell you a story about a very gifted man. He was my father. And his name was Vincenzo Tirone. And when your name is Vincenzo, a lot of times they call you Jimmy. But they never called my dad Jimmy. My dad was always Vince or Vinny. Okay? My dad was not a real tall man. My dad was about 5'4". And my dad had a barrel chest.
Grandpa, you sound like this big. I don't think so.
Yeah, and I'm kind of built like my dad, barrel chested. But my dad was gifted. He was. My dad had a flair for languages. He spoke many languages. He was a polyglot. Okay, he could speak Italian. He's Sicilian, obviously. He was from Sicily, from a place called Port Embeddico. He was born in 1902, August the 4th. Okay, he was the oldest of all the Tirone kids. Tirone. In Italian it's Tirone, in English it's Tyrone. And he was gifted with a voice. And he could draw. And when I remember when I was a little kid, whenever holidays came around like Christmas, he would draw. He would always draw postcards. He would make his own, and he drew. And it was the same thing with Easter or birthdays. He never had to buy cards because he could draw. He was a tremendous artist, and his voice. He was a tenor. He was a tenor singer, and he always had a desire to be a singer in life. Unfortunately, he never had got that opportunity. He sang with the Buffalo Philharmonic Orchestra, okay, as a guest, and he also did 6 weeks in Buffalo at the Shades Hippodrome, and he did Pagliacci. So he used to come out. He would come out dressed in the clown, and then he'd go, but boy, could he sing. He could hit those notes. And he could rattle the glass because he could sing so high.
Did he sing around the house, Dad?
Sing around the house all the time.
Now we know where he gets it.
All the time.
Now we know.
Unfortunately, I never appreciated that type of music because I was a Frank Sinatra guy, a Bing Crosby guy, and you know, I liked the modern music, and my dad always sang opera. And most of the stuff my dad sang was not in English. It was always in Italian or German or Greek or something. And but he was truly a gifted man. He had no education. He went to second year of grammar school, but he was a warm guy, a warm person. When you met my dad, you met somebody, and you remembered somebody. And I remember my dad in conversations, and one thing I remember very well. In 1948, I was 14 years old, and I'll never forget. They were all Italians, you know, like the Greeks get together and talk Greek. They were all speaking Italian, and I remember my dad saying, and this is an old saying that he was saying. He was saying to the guys, and he was saying that, you know, when you got 2 people, you got 3 opinions. Yeah. I'll never forget this. And when you got 5 people, you got 8 opinions. I'll never forget that. The other thing I always remember my dad saying to me was, he said to me in Italian, he said, "Don't ever pee on my head and tell me it's raining." Okay? Don't ever pee on my head and tell me it's raining.
Did he tell you what that meant?
He said it in Italian.
Yeah, but
in those days, I understood.
No, but did he tell you what that meant?
No, he never told me what it meant, but I knew what it meant.
Him. Oh, yeah, right.
Don't ever lie to him.
Don't
ever lie to him. Okay? And by that time, I was taller than my dad, I think. Because my dad was never a big guy.
But he had a big voice.
Oh, did he have a volume voice?
So how tall? He was like 5'4", 5.
He was about 5'4".
And how many? Like, what was his weight?
His weight was probably about 170 pounds.
Oh, so he was a big guy.
Oh yeah, he was. I'm built like him.
Right.
You know, he's kind of fluffy. But he was a wonderful athlete. He was a good swimmer. He liked to swim. He belonged to a club. I forget the name of the club. I want to say Polar Bear Club. I don't know if that was it. But they would swim long distances. They'd swim 20 miles. He was a swimmer.
Wow.
He loved to swim, and he was a great tennis player. Wonderful tennis player.
Huh.
In fact, in the city of Buffalo, one time he came in third in the city of Buffalo, the amateurs. Yeah, he loved tennis. He loved that. He loved tennis. He loved swimming. It's amazing because I don't swim. Okay, the only fallacy my poor dad ever had was he never had time for his kids, but he had time for your kids. He took care of everybody else's kids but his own kids. You know, like I'd say, let's go play tennis, Dad. Never played tennis with my dad. Okay. And I have to cry when I think about that because my dad was such a warm, wonderful individual of a guy, but he never had time for his own kids.
And then he fell in the park?
Huh?
He fell in the park?
And then he fell in the park. Yeah, there was a hole, and we used to go to the park on weekends, and the women would all make pasta. You know, the women, we'd have 5, 6, 7 cars go out to Chester Ridge Park. And the women would cook pasta, and we'd have spaghetti and sausage, you know. And so the cooking was out there. We had fun, and there was a hole, and my dad was running because he was an athlete. My dad was very athletic, and he twisted his ankle in this hole. And my dad was a typical old timer. He said the only good doctor is a horse doctor because he can't ask the horse what's wrong with him. He figured out. My dad used to have all these things. Anyway, 6 weeks later, or I would say not more than 6 weeks, this was probably in around June, and he ended up with a blood clot in his ankle. And what he did was, I remember because he would always take olive oil, hot olive oil, and he'd rub it at night because that was the old custom from Sicily. And they would rub it, and it'd be okay. And what happened was his ankle never got better. It was a blood clot. And if he would have gone to a doctor or the hospital, they could have drained it.
What was he, 45?
He was 46. They could have drained it, but he didn't do that. He had what we call in Italian a hard head. Okay, and so. Anyway, what happened was he had a heart attack one night. I was in the house with him, and my mother and dad owned a grocery store, and we lived on the second story.
How old were you, Dad?
I was 13, and in 2 weeks I was going to be 14. Yeah, and because this was September the 3rd, and so all of a sudden I'm sitting there, and he got up from the living room and went into the bathroom. And because the bathroom was right there, and to look to see the color of his face because he wasn't feeling well, and he had agita, you know, upset. His stomach wasn't feeling well, and so then he went and sat down, and all of a sudden I heard these noises, and so I went in, and my father was like this, and he died, and that was. So I went to the window, opened the window, and my mother was sitting down there with my Uncle Philip. Hey, Dad's not well. Dad's not well. So they come running up, and that's when they called. We didn't have 911 in those days, but that's when they finally called the doctor and so on and so forth. But he had passed. And what they said, the doctor said that he had what was the technical term that he used? Thrombosis, coronary thrombosis. And he said he was probably injured. And what happened was it formed a blood clot and went to his heart and took him out. and he was 46 years old. He was young, young guy. Great dad, wonderful dad. Did he ever hit me one time? Never. Did he ever lay a hand on me? Never.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
So what you're saying is he died on my birthday.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
You're saying that he died on my birthday.
Wow,
He
that's a
died
good point.
on her birthday.
He died on your birthday.
Wow.
What?
September
Now he
3rd.
Or no, better yet, you were given to us on the day he died.
Wow.
That's a gift. Did you know that, Dad? Did you ever piece two and two together?
Yeah.
He always says it every
Yeah,
year.
I say it every year.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
1948.
It's the feast day of Saint Gregory the Great.
Yeah.
It's almost my birthday in 3 or 2 months.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
And
So-
Todd, what's interesting, tell them how they laid the body in the home. They don't take it to
But
the
see, in those days, we didn't go to funeral parlors, so they laid the body in the house. It was right in the living room, and you know you're very familiar with this couple. Yeah, same thing there. And
They
so
do.
all the neighbors would come in, and my father had no hair. My father was bald. Okay, he went bald at a very young age. He was like 25, 23, 24 years old when he went bald. And so he always wore a hat. And, you know, not a baseball cap, you know, a hat. And so when people came in to see him, says, "Oh my God, I never knew Vin didn't have hair," because nobody's seen him without his hat. And so Vince, that was, and I want to tell you, at the funeral, because back in those days, you know, it wasn't like it is today. There were like 70 cars that went to the funeral, that went out to bury him.
Not everybody had a car.
And not everybody had a car,
Right.
yeah. I mean, he was so well liked. Everybody liked my
Oh.
dad. Like I say, he had time for everybody but his family. He was the kind of guy who never had a lot of time for his family, but boy, he had time for everybody else. I mean, and the one thing I always remember about my dad, because my dad spoke many languages. He spoke Spanish, he spoke some French, he was a polyglot. He had a gift for languages. And of course, he could speak all the dialects in Italian, which were like 26. And I don't know where he learned all this stuff, but anyway, we would get a call. And we lived on the east side of Buffalo. And the west side was all Italian people. So we would get a call because somebody would get a letter from Italy. Okay, so they'd call my dad. And my dad would say, I'm going to go over and read this letter for Mrs. Montagna.
Oh my gosh.
And of course, me, you know, I want to go with you, because I never wanted to be home. I always wanted to go out. So we would drive over to the west side, which would be about 25 minutes or 30-minute drive. And we'd get there, and we'd go in the house, and everybody'd be speaking Italian. And my dad would pick up the letter, and he would say 2 or 3 lines, and then speak to him and explain to him what the letter meant, because they couldn't read. Okay? And so that happened many times.
Wow.
Many times. Like I say, he was a well-liked guy. I mean, I'm going to tell you, the barber cried when my dad died. I mean, he was a well-liked guy. Vincenzo Tirone.
And Dad, you were the firstborn son.
I was the firstborn son.
And-
Fran was the oldest one.
So it's Fran.
Fran was born in 31. They were married in 30. I was born in 34. And Patrick was born in 44. But they had a couple of miscarriages during that time, too. And so Pat was born in 44, I think.
And they gave you his middle name. So Charles Vincent.
Yeah, and so
Tyrone.
I ended up with my dad's middle name when I was baptized. My dad was not a religious person. I never saw my dad in church. The only time I ever saw my dad in church was at the funeral. Never saw my dad in church, I'm sure he was a religious man, but you know, they came from Sicily, and you know, religion wasn't a big part of their life.
Dad, what was he born in America or Sicily?
No, he was born in
Oh,
Sicily.
that Porto America. And how old was he when he came to America?
He was 15.
And how old was it when Mama came to America?
You know that Mama was born
that's
here.
right. That's right.
Mama was born here. The rest of her kids, she was the first one that was born here.
And, okay.
That was American. The rest of them were born over there
And how did Mama and Vincent Tirone? So Mama's name was Lee, right?
Antonina.
Antonina. How did Antonina and Vincent meet?
Well, you know we had a friend called Sacramentos, and I think the Sacramentos brought the Tirones and the Russos together. I think that's what happened, because we were two different type of families. The Russos were all construction type people, and the Tirones were all they all worked at factories. They were just two different kinds of people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. The Tirones and the Russos.
Yeah, the Tirones and the Russos. And I think the Sacramentos were the ones that brought us together.
Got it.
Yeah. We had friends. They were called Mr. I remember Mr. Sacramento, Mrs. Sacramento. Yeah.
Any questions about Vincent Tirone?
I have one question.
Sure.
Okay, so basically, Dad, what were you saying before about like my birthday and how I was like a gift?
Well, you were a gift. You were a gift that came to us on the day that Vincent Tirone, my grandfather, your great-grandfather, passed away.
So
Okay.
That sounds good.
I want to share one other thing about my dad, too. When
Yeah.
my dad was at Shea's Hippodrome, when he sang, there was a man that happened to be there and heard him, and his name was Henry Murtaugh. And Henry Murtaugh was an agent from Hollywood. And he heard my dad sing. So he said to my dad, I really want you to come out to California, because I think I can do something for you in the movie industry. Not as an actor, not as a singer, but not as in the movies, but singing for somebody when somebody was going to play a part of a tenor, okay? And my dad would do the voice. So my dad came out here.
To California?
My dad came out to California. And this was, he got back a month before he died.
You mean he was in California when it was his hurt ankle?
Yeah, he went with his hurt ankle. Okay, he went with his hurt ankle. And so he met with Henry Murtaugh, and in fact, I have a letter. I think I gave you the letter that he had written, like in August, that I'm going to be moving to California because he was going to do the voice for the movies when they were going to play some tenor, and my dad would do the singing, and some movie star would, lip sing. And it was one of those things, and so that happened. But my dad died a month later.
Wow.
He never. But he said, "I'm going to go back. I'm going to sell the store. We're going to sell the store, and we're going to move to California."
We have a letter from Frank Thomas saying that.
Frank Manchuso
Frank
gave us
Manchuso.
that letter. I thought I gave it to you, Ty. Yeah, you probably do have it.
I have it.
Yeah, or Mom has it. And so
That's good.
that was going to be his break. And I'll never forget, because his letter, he was stating, I can't believe it. You come out to California and they got orange trees, and they got lemon trees. It reminds me of Sicily, he said. Lemon trees, orange trees, all these beautiful trees. And the weather was great because Buffalo, had all the snow and all that. Of course, it was just a matter of time for me to get out of and to come to the west, get away from the snow. So I wanted to share that Henry Murtaugh was the guy, and that was my dad's finally would have had at 45, 46 had an opportunity to do some work in the Hollywood in the field that he really wanted to do.
Yeah.
But I wanted to remark about what an artist he was. He used to draw for my mother. He would draw, like, I remember her birthday, and he would take a piece of paper and draw a card, and he'd draw tulips, and he would draw I mean, he was such an artist. I never got any of this. I never got any of his ability for art.
Well, you're a great dad.
But I'm a good dad.
And a good golfer.
And a good
golfer.
Yeah, my dad.
And you know what? And your art may have passed to Emma and Ava.
Well, I'll tell you, could he draw? Wow, could he draw? Woo! And you know, I'm so happy that I had this opportunity to talk about my father, because my father died so many years ago. I mean, you know, I was 14 years old and I'm 85 now, so that was 70 years ago. And so my dad was never part of my conversations anymore. He was never part of my my way of living. I mean, Dad was gone, and you know, and in heaven, and you know, it was something I just never gave Dad any more thoughts. You know, so today I'm thinking about him, and it's making my eyes moist and making my heart warm, and I'm excited about it because he was such a nice guy. God, everybody loved Vince. I mean, everybody loved Vince. In fact, when I'm with my cousins, that's all they talk about is Vince. You know, my cousin Frank, they loved my dad. My dad was the kind of guy you really loved. Like I say, if he ever had one weakness, he treated everybody else better than he treated his family. It was just the way he was, but he was a good guy, yeah. Good guy. Boy, what if he loved you guys, you kids. Woo! What if he loved you? And you know, she was born on the day that his funeral was. I mean, the day he died. My dad died September 3rd, and she was born September 3rd.
So guess what that means, Emma? September 3rd was always a day Grandpa probably thought of and made him a little sad because that's when his dad died. And guess what? His dad gave him the gift of a beautiful granddaughter to make that day a happy day instead of a sad day.
And I was never sad, though. I want to admit, I was never sad because my dad's been gone for so long that the sadness is gone. You know, I mean, and but great man. Yeah. In fact, we went back to visit him, and he's buried right next door to my grandmother. Okay, my grandmother, and that was in Buffalo at Calvary Cemetery. Yeah. Yeah, that was those were the days.
God bless
But
Vincent.
boy, could he sing. Ooh, could he sing. Could he sing.
God bless Vincent. God bless Vincent Tyrell. Let's hear it.
Oh, God.
Bravo.
I'm gonna take one.
Okay.